Today we discuss transversals and angle pairs. So we're going to classify pairs of angles that are formed by two parallel lines in a transversal. And we're also going to find the measure of angles that are formed by two parallel lines and a transversal. So we have what are known as adjacent angles. These are angles that are next to each other. And so I actually drew a picture like this. And I talked about these angles 1, 2, and 3. To be adjacent, they have to share a side and a vertex. So we said angle 2 and 3 are adjacent. We also said angle 1 and 2 are adjacent. But 1 and 3 are not adjacent. They only share a vertex, but they don't share a side. So that hopefully will help you with the difference between adjacent angles and a linear pair. A linear pair have to be adjacent, but they also have to form a line. So while these are adjacent, specifically here they're a linear pair because they do form a line. And then we also talked about because they form a line, then the measures of those angles will add to be 180 degrees, a straight angle. Vertical angles are angles that are formed by intersecting lines and they are non-adjacent. I like to tell my students that they form an X, and that seems to help them remember what vertical angles are. Because they are vertical, they also are congruent. So we would say angle 1 and angle 2 are congruent. Or you could say that if angle 1 was 150 degrees, then angle 2 would also be 150 degrees. Complementary angles are two angles that add up to be 90 degrees. So if we were to add these two angles, they would add to be 90 degrees, and that's what complementary means. Supplementary are two angles that add to be 180, so if we were to add these, we would get 180 degrees. Now, we did talk in class about the difference between supplementary angles and a linear pair. A linear pair have to be adjacent, so they have to be next to each other, whereas supplementary angles can just be angles anywhere located as long as those two angles add to be 180 degrees. A transversal is a line that intersects two or more lines. So then we talked about if I said A, B, and W here, W would be known as the transversal because we can see that it intersects A and B. Interior angles are angles that lie on the inside of our lines. So inside would be here. So that hopefully will show us our interior angles 3 and 4, and the other pair below it are 5 and 6. Exterior angles are angles that lie outside, so we're talking about outside here, would be known as exterior angles. So 1 and 2 are exterior angles as well as 7, 8. So I would say down here at even right, angle 1, angle 2, angle 7, and angle 8 are all known as exterior angles, where the interior angles are angle 3, 4, 5, and 6. Parallel lines are lines that never intersect, and they have the same slope, but different intercepts. Okay, they're two lines that never cross. So when we have parallel lines, we get special pairs that occur. So these special pairs are the next four that we're going to talk about. Alternate interior angles, these are angles that are inside our parallel lines. So we're talking about inside the parallel lines. And then they have to be on opposite or alternating sides of the transversal. So we're talking about this angle here and this one here. I like to tell my students they form an S, or this angle and this angle here. So we have angle 3 and 5 here and 4 and 6. And if those lines are parallel, then these angles are congruent. So we would say angle 3 is congruent to 5, and angle 4 is congruent to angle 6. Okay, our next special pairs are called alternate exterior. So these are angles that lie outside our transversal and on outside the parallel lines and on opposite sides of the transversal. So they make those ones or these ones here. So I have 1 and 8 and 2 and 7. Now, because these lines are parallel, then we get a relationship. These angles are congruent. So we'd say angle 1 is congruent to 8, and angle 2 is congruent to 7. Corresponding angles, these are angles that lie in the same position on the two lines in relation to the transversal. So we have our parallel lines which come into play, but really it's our transversal we're going to talk about. They're on the same side of the transversal in the same position. So we have these angles here. I like to tell my students they form an F, and I'll show you here how they might form an F. We're looking at, there's our F, and these are what are known as corresponding. Now we can redraw the F like this, so it's kind of a reflection, and then our angles are right here. We can draw the F upside down, so the corresponding angles are here, or we can flip that F over, and our corresponding angles are here. So I'll show you all the pairs. We have 2 and 5, 1 and 6, 4 and 8, and 3 and 7. If those lines are parallel, then these angles are congruent. So I'm going to say angle 2 will be congruent to angle 5 because they're corresponding. Angle 4 is congruent to 8. Angle 1 is congruent to angle 6. And then the last pair, angle 3, will be congruent. Can't see that. I'll write it up here, or down here. Angle 3 will be congruent to angle 7. Okay, our last special pairs are called consecutive interior angles. And these are angles that are on the same side of the transversal. So again, I'll draw the transversal here. They're on the same side and between the parallel lines. So that would be in here because we have to be between our parallel lines. And I like to tell kids, and it's kind of stretching it, but they make a C. And we are talking about these two angles. Now, these are different from the other pairs because all the other pairs have been congruent, but these are supplementary. Supplementary means they add to 180 degrees. So I have 4 and 5, and the way that we talk about this is you can either say angle 4 and 5 are supplementary, or we can say the measure of angle 4 plus the measure of angle 5 will equal 180 degrees. There's another pair, and it's 3 and 6, so we can also say that angle 3, the measure of angle 3 plus the measure of angle 6 will equal 180 degrees. Okay, on example 1 it says find the different pairs of congruent angles. Now this is a little misleading because they're not all congruent. The majority of them are, but so I may change that wording when we get to specific angles. So we're looking for all AIAs. AIAs are alternating, so they're on different sides of the transversal and between the lines. So we're looking at 4 and 6. These are the ones that make the S, and 3 and 5. So we would say that angle 3 is congruent to 5, and the other pair was angle 4 is congruent to 6. Now CIAs, these are inside our parallel lines on the same side of the transversal. So we're looking at those pair and the other pair over there. Now remember that corresponding interiors, consecutive interiors are not congruent. Here's the pair where it's not congruent, but they are supplementary. So we're going to say the measure of angle 3 plus the measure of angle 6 equals 180 degrees, and on the other side of that, the measure of angle 4 plus the measure of angle 5 equals 180 degrees. Okay, our next pair are AEAs. AEAs are on alternating sides of the transversal and outside on the exterior of our lines. So we're looking at 2 and 7 and 1 and 8. So here we're going to say these are congruent. Angle 2 is congruent to angle 7, and the other pair, angle 1, is congruent to angle 8. CAs, those are the ones that are on the same side corresponding and in the same position. These are the ones that I like to say make the F. So we have 4 and 8 there. I lost that. 8, sorry. So back to corresponding, we would say that angle 4, these are congruent, and angle 8. There are actually 4 pairs of these. Angle 2 and angle 5. Angle 1 and angle 6. And then the last pair, angle 3 and angle 7. Okay, an LP stands for a linear pair. These are 2 angles that have to be adjacent and form a line. And we have multiple pairs of those. We have these 2 that are adjacent and form a line. So we'll say the measure of angle 2 and the measure of angle 4 equals 180. We also have these 2. Measure of angle 5 plus the measure of angle 6 equals 180. We actually have 8 pairs. I'm not going to list them all here, but I can draw on there. We have 7 and 8, 1 and 2, 3 and 4, and then we have 1 and 3, and 7 and 8, or 6 and 7, sorry, and 5 and 8. And those will all give you linear pairs. Vertical angles are the angles that make the X. So I'm looking for X's. And we're talking those 2 right there. And we can see that these ones are a pair as well. So when I write these are congruent. We'll say angle 1 is congruent to 4. 2, angle 2 is congruent to angle 3. And then down below we have the angle 6 that is congruent to angle 8. And our last pair, angle 5, which is congruent to angle 7. On our next example, I'm going to give you a specific angle. Here it says 4 is 72 degrees. Then I'm going to ask you to find all the other kinds of angles. So I'm going to look at 4 and 1. I know those are vertical angles, and I know that vertical angles are all congruent, so I know that 1 also has a measure of 72 degrees. The next pair I'm going to look at will be 4 and 8. Those are the ones that make the F, so they're corresponding angles, and I know that corresponding angles are congruent. So 8 is also 72 degrees. The next pair are the ones that make the S. They're the alternate interior angles, and those are congruent as well. So I'm going to write that angle 6 is also 72 degrees. From here, I'm going to look at 2 and 4. 2 and 4 are adjacent and form a line, so because I know that those 2 angles have to add to be 180 degrees. So if I take 180 and subtract 72, I get 108. So 2 is 108 degrees. And then I'm going to use that 2. I'm now going to look at 2 and 5. 2 and 5 are corresponding angles. They're the ones that make the F. And so I know that 5 is also 108. Now I'm going to look at 2 and 3. 2 and 3 are the ones that make the X. Those are vertical angles. I know that all vertical angles are congruent. So this is also 108. And now I need to look at 7. I'm going to still use that 2 as I look at that 7. That 2 and the 7 are AEAs, alternate exterior angles, and I know that alternate exterior angles are congruent, so this is also 108 degrees. On the last one it says the parallel lines are cut by a transversal, find X. So we're going to look at what we know. These are parallel, cut by a transversal, so we get these kinds of angles. And those kinds of angles are the ones that form the F. Those are corresponding angles, and corresponding angles are congruent. If they're congruent, their measures are also equal. So I'm going to take 118 and set it equal to 2x. Then to solve this, we just divide by 2, and you get 59 equals x. All right, that should help with your assignment transversals and angle pairs worksheet. Good luck.